if you're baking a cake, you need like flour, butter, sugar, probably. Take one of those things out, you're going to really struggle to bake a good cake. Good quality design, good quality motion, built around a good quality concept with a good team will create something engaging and delightful.
I would like to start your interview talking about AI, if you don't mind. You have an amazing skill using AI tools, and I just wanted to ask you about the way they impacted the way you work and how you use them in your day to day.
If you've got a starting point, so if I've got a piece of design from one of the team that I can load into the AI and then use it to expand, use that as a style reference and expand on that. Particularly in a small company, in a startup, which is what I work for at the moment. It's very efficient. It's very cost effective. So yeah, rapid prototyping, rapid exploration of ideas, I think is something that AI is very, very good for.
Mhm.
And then depending on what you're making, it can be used. It can be used to output content. There does tend to be quite a lot of little bits of cleanup required as well. So, for example, work on sports games. If you wanted to make some team crests or things like that, or a bunch of different team jerseys with different designs, it would probably do a pretty good job of that. But there likely would be artifacts that you need to go in and clean up. But you can get a lot of good concepts very, very quickly.
So what I hear is that for rapid prototyping, concepting, it works great. Is fine tuning and maybe mass production where the challenges appear, right?
I think AI is a tool, like many other tools, and AI is just a group term. I think it depends on what you're doing, whether you're using something like Adobe Firefly or Leonardo or Midjourney or Runway or whatever you're using. But at the end of the day, it's a tool, and the tool is most powerful when it's combined with professional expertise. So, and actually, and an asset library. So if you are an existing IP and you have a catalogue of your own content, using that proprietary data that you own the rights to as a training data set, plugging that into a tool set, and then using your team to expand on that, that would likely yield very good results. And I think that ethically that's a pretty safe way to go as well, because you're not leveraging someone else's style. You've got an enclosed system where you are using all of your own content to train and produce more of your own content and tune it and finesse it using your in-house team. But yeah, it's a tool, and you will get good results from it if with talented individuals. In isolation, you will likely get you'll still get something, but you'll likely get less value out of it at the moment anyway.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And Mike, you have a lot of experience in the gaming industry, and you've seen the progression of the hardware and how it affected basically the technology, how it changed the way we represent the visuals in the game. So, can you think of something in the past that had this impact, maybe similar to AI is having now?
I think the thing that excites and frightens people about AI is how accessible it is, as long as you have access to the internet and can type. So it's got huge mass market appeal. Whereas the other innovations I've seen are more specialized to skill sets. So, but I think a huge jump that I saw in the gaming industry was when games started to move from 2D pixel games to 3D on console, and then so they've come along a long way since they went 3D. But yeah, that was the big difference. That was a game changer for a lot of teams, a lot of studios, and a lot of budgets. But you still still very much a specialized tool for expert use in a controlled environment with a lot of guidelines and performance limitations. But yeah, that's if you look at what games are doing now, it's unbelievable, and it kind of started from that switch to 3D. Even though what we see today is unrecognizable compared to those early days.
And do you have, Matt? And that's last question about AI. Do you have any favorite tool for AI for gaming? Like I tried tools that are for like 3D modeling and such, and I didn't find them as polished as Midjourney maybe or other image generation tools.
When you're playing around and you don't have a specific output, you can come up with something that's cool, and you can celebrate that, and that's really fun if you're doing it as a hobbyist or you're just doing it for yourself. But when you work in a professional environment, you're working to a brief, so you've got a very specific outcome. That's when it can get more difficult, and that's when I find, for me, like video in 3D is not quite there. That's why it's good for concepting, but not really good for the final output. I think depending on the work you're doing, you need to try different AI tools. So again, for playing around with concepts, for coming up with imagery that inspires the team in their work, I use Midjourney. But depending on who you are, who you work for, and what you're doing, Adobe Firefly has got a bunch of strengths. Leonardo is also fun to play around with. Although the challenge I have with Leonardo is that there's just so many models and so much variety that it can be a bit overwhelming. I think Midjourney is a little more accessible, particularly with the web app, and if you're a new user, because you guide it through your own style references rather than choosing a specific model. So it's a tighter loop. I have a drawing that I did, or I have a photo that I like. I can upload that. I can use it as a style reference. If I want to change the outlook, I can change the style reference. They've also added the personalization feature, where you can start to create your own unique. I guess it's like a unique train model, but it feels much more contained to a few choices that can yield a lot of output. Leonardo has a lot of choices that can yield a lot of output, and it can be a bit overwhelming. Like, you always feel like, oh, I need to go through and try them all to see what gives me the best result, but that takes a very, very long time. So yeah, I would say Midjourney, but I know other people have strong preferences for other tools. And then if you're using it professionally, liability becomes a huge question, particularly if you're in a big corporation. You need to make sure what you're using is approved by your legal department, because all these tools and all these companies will have different terms and conditions around what liability they take on for your work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The democratization of this technology is insane. Like everyone can use it, and it's basically um, a boost for everyone's skill on video and animation and design.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the visual tools. I think I'm kind of missing out. Probably what the biggest one is ChatGPT and other text-based AI tools, and what they can do for people in terms of answering questions. I think for anyone out, generating alternative resumes for people is a really accessible thing. And I don't know that I'd recommend anyone copies and pastes it, but certainly to give you ideas of how you can represent yourself, or just fun stuff like, hey, I want to eat vegetarian food this week. Can you give me 7 days worth of vegetarian recipes? ChatGPT will give it a crack. Or I want to change my workout. Can you give me a 30-day workout only using barbells or whatever? And it'll take a good go at it. Now, you can't be 100% confident that it's exactly right, because obviously, again, it's the product of its inputs. But I certainly think um, it's just fascinating what you can do with a few words and what it can generate. So I've had quite a lot of fun playing around with that too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you get a new perspective, and suddenly everything gets fixed. Do you mind if we pivot? You know that the podcast that I'm doing is basically to help the new generation of people who want to get into gaming. So, do you mind if we talk about your early career? I'm really interested in how you started in this industry. Did you always work in the gaming industry, or did you start in a different field? Because you have like an amazing balance of like artistic taste and skills and also technical skills. So where does that come from?
When I was a teenager, I actually gave up art because I just wanted to earn money. I was a financial advisor for a little while, which seems very strange now. Yeah, but it didn't bring me any joy. And thankfully, I listened to that inner voice that, and I was young enough that I hadn't taken on any dependencies. You know, I didn't, I didn't have anything tying me down, so I was able to switch. It was actually my dad who was the one responsible for me going back to art, because I was talking to him about it one day, and he's just talking about it as if I was still pursuing it, and he said, "Oh, you know, I kind of feel like you've definitely given up pursuing art as a job. My concern is you've also given it up as a hobby." And I don't think he was trying to be deep and profound, but that affected me in a pretty profound way. I think I was about 20 years old and decided to reapply to university. And I did a computer animation degree in, I can't remember the year, 2000 and, no, sorry, in the late 90s. So what attracted me to computer animation, and this is going to sound super old fashioned, is the first time I saw a photo on a computer screen. So it seems insane now, but it was not at all a thing to see images on a computer screen. Computer screens were all like DOS, and you know, tiny little characters. Video games were very very binary, but very simple compared to what they are now. And then the first time I saw a photo on screen, I'm guessing it was like probably the first version of Photoshop. I was like, "What is that?" That captivated me, and I can tell you how long ago it was when I started doing it, because Photoshop didn't have layers when I first started playing around with it, and you had to do everything with selection masks, I think, and 3D software was all wireframe. So 3D Studio it was at the time. It was before 3ds Max. So anytime you wanted to see the results of lighting or UVs or anything like that, you had to render the frame. So it's very slow workflow compared to what it was now, but very interesting, captivating to me. Yeah, so I did computer animation, got a degree in that, then went and worked as a designer, graphic designer, for 3 or 4 months, because I had to get a job after university. And while I was doing that, I got contacted by Gremlin Interactive, which was a company based in Sheffield in the UK. They used to make a game called Actua Soccer.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, it was one of the first 3D football games, and they actually had the dominant market share of 3D football games in Europe for a very brief period of time. We all, you know, I'm sure we'll chat about that, but we all know what that market grew into and who owns that market now. So that was definitely a missed opportunity for that studio. Um, they they went. I worked there for 2 years, and then I left to work for a company in London because I wanted to move back down south in the UK, called Intelligent Games. Gremlin Interactive got bought by Infogrames after I left, and I think eventually maybe went out of business in Sheffield. They're now up and running again with some of the old leadership, a company called Sumo Digital, and they're doing well. But yeah, I went to work for a company called Intelligent Games as an art lead, making like an Action Man game. They had a contract with Hasbro, who owned the Action Man franchise at the time, and we made a 2D scrolling game for them. It was for kids, I think young kids, like 4 or 5 years old, which was really interesting. kids are very sophisticated now, but we did some play tests with some kids and just asking them to do simple things like, hey, can you move? We put them in front of a computer and we said, can you move this character up the screen? And bearing in mind, this is in 2002, so they lifted the mouse off the table. Now, they wouldn't do that anymore, I don't think. But it made us, it was very interesting because then you're like, right, we need a super simple control mechanism. We need to guide the kids through it. We had an extremely tight deadline. Had a brand new team, and we had like 10 weeks to make the game. I used to design the levels at the weekend, and then we'd come in on the Monday. I would do all the modelling and texturing, hand it over to the animator, and then he would do that, and then and we had to do intros and outros as well, build the levels. It was insane. We had a team of like 4 people. We had a very, very good engineer. The engineer was he was a Formula One programmer who was taking a break for a year just to have a bit of fun, and he came and worked with us at a significant pay decrease. But that was crazy, and yeah, we did it. We made the game in 10 weeks, and then completed that successfully, and then the company got a contract to do a little game called FIFA 2002 for the World Cup, and the company asked me to be the art lead on that because at the time EA had too many projects on the go for their internal dev team, so they actually outsourced the entire game, which seems insane now. They wouldn't do that anymore. But yeah, they outsourced the entire game, including the code, to our studio. So they were working on one version of FIFA, like the regular version, FIFA 2002, and then we were building the World Cup version, I believe, for the 2002 World Cup in Japan and Korea. And that really, if I had to define the big break in my career, it was that moment, I would say, when I got offered that role at Intelligent Games, because that led into everything else I was able to, all the other opportunities I got in my career.
I imagine you had a bigger team for the FIFA game than the previous game you were developing at Intelligent.
Not much bigger, no. I would say still the art team was 5 of us. Don't remember. We had a dedicated technical artist. Yeah, I mean, it's still basically an amount of people that would fit into a single decent sized room in a studio. Like the entire studio of Intelligent Games was, I think, 60 or 70 people, and they had three or 4 games on the go. So very, very different to big budget AAA console games now, but a lot simpler.
And how was the process that you guys followed on that first game compared to what that evolved later on, like to maybe the last games you worked on?
I would say very unstructured compared to how it's done now, where you have, like, artists would not start work on a stadium unless they had the full reference set. It's done, the stadiums are photographed to a very specific rule set using photogrammetry, or they're scanned with a LiDAR scanner or something like that. And that's the way it's going. I mean, photographs will probably go away and the whole thing will just be scanned. It's all broken down. It's all color controlled. The lighting's controlled. You've got very specific shaders that are used. Everything's calibrated. So the stadiums are, the models now are incredibly accurate. Or if they're not accurate, they've been tweaked to fit. Like, for example, the pitch is always the same size in a game like FIFA, I think. So the stadium proportions have to be adjusted, but everyone knows that it's not by accident. So it's very, very accurate, very controlled. Back in the day, you would just have one artist and you would give them a stadium, and they had about 4 weeks I think, to sort of plan out, find their reference, plan out how they were going to build the stadium, build it, model it, texture it, light it, integrate it into the game themselves, test it, and then move on to the next one. That's absolutely not how it's done anymore.
One artist doing all of that.
Yeah, but no shaders. So, a lot of the skill was figuring out what to put into the texture. The lighting was, you vertex painted the lighting into the stadium. So hand painted the color onto the vertices and then checked it in game. And the in-game lighting was very rudimentary. There was no sense of shadowing in the game back then on the players. So achieving things like Sunny Day was very, very difficult. So you had a lot more control, and the iteration loop was very tight. So you could try something, you integrated your content, you did the build, you looked at it in game, and you just kept going through that and through that and through that and tweaking on it. And obviously, the better the artist is, the better the result was, because of the painting and things involved. So the consistency across the game probably is not what it is today, where the assets and the content and the style is extremely consistent, because it has to be, because of how things are lit.
Yeah, and Matt, from your experience working on that game, because you spent almost 18 years,
20 years, yeah.
20 years, yeah, working at FIFA. Did you see like an inflection point, like something that really marked the way the game evolved? Was there any edition of the game that was like, wow, we did a huge jump here? Or...
The big change that happened was nothing to do with art. The big change that happened was that the team rewrote the gameplay engine, because they just weren't getting the results they needed from the existing gameplay engine. That, and that's a big deal on a game like that. We've got to make it every year. It's a massive undertaking to rewrite a gameplay engine. I can't remember how long it took. And I don't know, I think it might have taken longer than initially planned, or they had to do it in parallel whilst also building the game. And I think FIFA 07 or FIFA 08 was the first game that shipped with the new gameplay engine. But it was an investment in a foundation, so they kept building on it year on year, and that worked out for the company. It was worth it. The person who pushed for that change from a sort of business leadership position, so the boss of the game at that point, was Andrew Wilson, who has since become the successful CEO of EA for the last 11 years. So, he knew what he was doing, and he's subsequently done it at a much, much bigger scale. And watching Andrew work was great. He's very, very good at what he does, and he was able to take that franchise to a new level that it's then built on and gone to an even higher level. But I think having him running the franchise, and him and that team of people who successfully pitched to the powers that be at that company to rewrite the gameplay engine and take on that risk, that was probably the pivotal moment for the franchise. It took some time. I think another pivotal moment on that franchise was when FIFA Ultimate Team was created, which again was just a small extra download that I think cost $10 initially, and then that's become something else that's crazy. So those two decisions, to rewrite the gameplay engine and to invest in Ultimate Team, made a huge difference to that franchise, allowed it to grow, and then allowed that investment into the technology, including how we built the visuals, and where we were able to take them. And so the expectations increase, which allows you to pitch more things and do more things. So yeah, that was it was good. It was a good time.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's crazy to see how someone decides to take that insane amount of risk, right? Rewrite the whole code and everything. It's
yeah, it's not uneducated though. It's not. I mean, it's not something they just sit down in one meeting and decide to do. There's a lot of planning and expertise that goes into a decision like that. But yeah, ultimately, someone is making that decision, and to see that validated. I think another example on that game again was the decision to walk away from the FIFA license. That's been very, very successful as well. But that was not a product of a single meeting either, or Fortnite pivoting away from a game about forts. that proved to be an extremely good decision. And I'm sure there's a number of those. I'm sure Call of Duty's got its own stories. I just never worked for Activision, so I don't know what they are. But I think it's about what it's about is seeing an opportunity and assessing it and making a decision whether to go for it or not. And that's what people who are very successful from the business side, from my experience in games, but this is probably generally true of business opportunities and opportunities in life, is can you recognise the opportunity when it's there, and can you persuade other people to take advantage of the opportunity, if it's just yourself. So for me, being offered the art lead role on FIFA, I understood that was an opportunity, even though at the time I didn't actually want to work on sports games, because at the time I didn't think they were that creative. But from a career perspective, I understood the opportunity was. I since changed that perspective quite a lot. But that was a very personal one, and it was just up to me. Do I take the opportunity or not? Another one was when I got asked to move to Vancouver from London. A huge life change, but again, a great opportunity. But they're very personal. It's much more complex to recognise it in a business context, in a corporate context, and to be able to build that into a plan, persuade a publicly traded company to take advantage of that, and then go for it, and then see the results, and that bring a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. Because at the end of the day, it's entertainment that we're working in, and if you're not entertaining people, it doesn't feel like you're getting the right outcome from your work. So to see so many people enjoying playing a video game that you've worked on, that's taken some risks and they've been successful, is a great thing.
Cool, Matt. Can I ask you for advice for the younger generation? So imagine there's a 16-year-old who dreams of following in your footsteps. What advice would you give him or her? Is there anything specific you'd recommend to focus on?
You've got to go for it. It's not going to happen by accident, especially if you're dealing with a craft. Like, you can't just decide one day that you want to be an excellent programmer, or an excellent artist or animator or audio engineer. It's a craft. You need to learn it. You need to invest time. You need to put 10,000 hours in, essentially. So, and we're talking about, I spent my whole career working on sports games. So professional athletes are a great example. If you look at the work they put in to get to where they get to, it's the vast majority of them anyway. It's a similar thing. So that's the first thing. If you want to go into a craft, in terms of advising people, if they want to go into more of the business side, that's not my area. So that's you'd have to get advice from somebody else. But if we're talking about art, learn your craft.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you want to be an artist in the games industry, most companies are quite specialised. So if they're specialised, and you're applying for a modelling and texturing role, then you need to make sure that your work, at least your first work they're going to see, is focused around that. If it's lighting, make sure it's lighting that they see. And so find out what they're looking for, and also try and understand where the quality bar is. I think that's an important one, where people need to really try and be self-aware, or be willing to get hard feedback. So I've had a number of people in my career come to me and tell me that they want to be an artist and show me work, and sometimes the work's good enough and sometimes it isn't, and that's where you've got to say to people, you need to look at, hey, what's the quality of the work people are doing in the role you're applying for, and do you think your work's at that level? Because if the answer is no, you're probably not going to get an interview, but you can use it as inspiration and motivation and keep trying. And then when you feel like your work stands up next to that, then you're probably ready. And you will always improve in a professional environment, but you know, particularly with art, it's highly visual. People have an opinion as soon as they see it. So you need to create the right first impression. So that's about hitting a certain quality bar. And then the other bit of advice I'd give to people is you need to maintain that first impression as you go through your interview process. So one thing I've seen a lot is people putting too much work in their portfolio, and the quality tailing off. So when what you want to do is just put your strongest work in, and if that's only 10 pieces of work, but they're all of a high standard, that's better than putting 20 pieces in where 10 of them are not as strong, because I'm going to remember the last image I saw, not the first one. And if you're great at modeling and texturing, but you suck at drawing, don't put drawing in your portfolio unless you're applying for a concept art role, in which case your drawing needs to be good anyway. So you probably shouldn't be applying for that role. If your drawing is super strong, put it in, because it's always lovely to see diversity of skills. Like well-rounded artists definitely catch the eye. But that's my two bits of advice are, yeah, understand the role you're applying for and where the quality bar is, and then tailor your portfolio to meet and maintain that quality bar. And if you've got other work that you feel, yeah, and don't put too much work in your portfolio. Just maintain that impression. And then if you do get the opportunity to chat and have an interview, just do a little bit of research. Like if you're applying to a gaming company, you need to play the company's games, or at least read some reviews of them so you can talk about them, and be engaged in the industry. Have a favorite game that you can talk about, because you're trying to establish a rapport with the people that are chatting with you. If you can bond over a shared game experience in a gaming interview, that's only going to help you. If you're applying to work on a sports game and you like sports, it's not a requirement, but it's going to be helpful. So I think just tailor yourself for the role that you're applying for, because there's a lot of competition and a lot of specialization out there. I think if you just like, no, this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be no matter what I'm applying for, I think that might work. But I think it's not taking advantage of all the tools at your disposal compared to understanding this is the role I'm going for and this is how I'm going to adapt my resume, my portfolio, etc., for this role, because you want to try and make it easy for them to offer you an interview. And if you think about, imagine how many resumes they might be going through, imagine how many portfolios they might be going through. People are not spending an hour considering you. They're probably spending 3 or 4 minutes just clicking through fast, being like, okay, oh yeah, no, I like them. No, yeah, no. And you just want to grab their attention so they come back and be like, yeah, I think I'd like to chat to this person. I think I want to spend 45 minutes or an hour getting to know this person a little better. That's what you're trying to do initially. And then once you get the interview, you need to keep building on that. But the first thing is how you're going to get your foot in the door, and then how you're going to take advantage of that opportunity. I think the other piece of advice I'd have for people is don't limit your aspirations. Like if you want to be at the top of the industry, if you want to be working at a senior level on a AAA game or on animated movies or whatever it is, or you want to be the director of photography for a Hollywood film, whatever it might be, it's achievable. I've seen many people do it, but it doesn't happen by accident. But you shouldn't limit yourself from where you start. You just gotta look for those opportunities and pursue them, and be willing to make changes and sometimes make sacrifices to get them. So a good example is if you come from a small town and you want to work on a AAA franchise, you're likely going to have to move, right? It's often not possible to stay where you grew up with all your friends when you were a kid and achieve your career aspirations. And for some people, it's more important to stay with family and friends than it is to move away. But again, so understanding what your priorities versus your aspirations, and making choices, and being okay with those choices.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Matt. And it's amazing advice. I'll definitely share this with my kid when he gets to the age to get into gaming because he's dreaming about doing that. And I have just one last question if you have time for it, Matt. If not, we can leave it here. But when we first met, I remember we briefly talked about the role of motion design, but I never had the chance to follow up. So I want to ask you, what do you think? How do you think motion design influences a game like Match Day?
Human beings are attracted by motion. I think if we were to A/B the game, this exactly the same game, but we just remove the motion, we engagement would drop off very, very quickly. So I think what it does is it adds engagement, it adds visual interest and excitement. So a really good example. We're talking about mobile games now. So free to play mobile games. If you think about rewards, for example. So we work on the same game. So I've got like an art direction philosophy called rewarding rewards. That's from motion. It's very, very difficult to make something feel rewarding without, you know, without a flash, or without confetti, or without sparkles, or without scale, or whatever it is. And so I think, we're attracted by motion, and we use motion in games to attract and hold people's attention. And now it's a lot more complex than that, but that's the motivation for it, is to pull you in as a player, to say to you, come in and play this game. It's worth your time. It's worth your investment. And then to hold people in there by engaging them, by keeping them stimulated. I think that's the key. You're trying to hold people's attention onto that screen. Where you don't want their eyes to start sliding to whatever else is going on around them. And that's what motion is great for. Without it, I just don't think the game would feel alive.
Yeah, I like what you said about rewarding rewards. I think they also make the rewards more delightful when you see these flashes and this confetti, all of that. And then what you say about grabbing the attention, I was thinking about this lately, like the way the brain reacts to motion is like kind of a survival mechanism. Like if you see something moving, it instantly grabs your attention because that could be a risk.
So this happens all the time with my dog. If you've got a dog, watch your dog when you take your dog for a walk. Something can be standing right next to them and they don't really react to it, and then it moves, and see what they do, because they're even more attuned to motion than we are. But that's kind of what we like. And I think delight is an important word when you're talking about games. Games are not played. They're not part of Maslow's hierarchy of need. We don't need games for sustenance, for life, right? They're for entertainment. And there's an awful lot of them out there now, catering for every different type of person and every different type of device. And if people are playing your game, that's a privilege. How are you bringing them in, and how are you delighting them, and how are you continuing to delight them? And that is very often by adding motion to delightful design. But it's not. I don't really separate the two things. I think it's an experience, and it's like a recipe. Motion is just a core part of the recipe. If you take it out, I use cooking analogies too much, but if you're baking a cake and you haven't got, and you need like flour, butter, sugar, probably take one of those things out, you're going to really struggle to bake a good cake. It's the same with motion. Good quality design, good quality motion, built around a good quality concept with a good team will create something engaging and delightful.
Amazing, Matt. This was super fun. I really had a great time talking to you.
Yeah, it's good, Mark.
Thanks so much, Matt.
All right, you have a good day, Mark. See you later.
Goodbye.